got a share portfolio, and it just sort of sits there in the background and slowly ticks away. And if you look at the comparison, it's actually mind-blowing to see what that 109% return on capital in a 16-month period. Like, it's actually insane to think of how fast that has grown, how fast an investment property has grown compared to the shares that I've had sitting there slowly ticking away for years.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Dashdot Insider, the auditory epicenter for passionate property investors seeking a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. Joining me today, we have another very special guest. This is Leah Finch, who is one of our clients here at Dashdot. She has a very, very interesting story. I think there are a lot of lessons in Leah's story that if you're listening to this, you may be able to relate to. So first up, how are you feeling today, Leah?
Yeah, good. Yeah, working from home today. Feeling really good, Emil. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for deciding to jump on. Now, just to give everybody listening a little bit of background on your situation, you have one property that you've acquired through Dashdot so far. And that's about right?
Yes. Yep. So first investment property through Dashdot. So very exciting for us.
Okay. And the purchase price for that was in WA. The purchase price was $420,000. And you recently got a new val of $562,000. So that meant that it had shot up by $142,000 in just 16 months. So it's making you about $8,000 a month, something like that, which is pretty decent. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, getting an investment property has always been like a major goal of mine. And I'm just really excited that my partner Mick and I could achieve that. And it's just, it's so cool to see how much it's grown. Like, it's amazing.
All right, let's drill into that a little bit. You just said it had been a dream of yours to have an investment property. Tell us, like, where did that dream come from, and what made you decide that yes, you definitely want property, family? What was it sort of triggered that?
Yeah, I think I started to really educate myself around what property investment means and what we could achieve with having an investment property. And it was really the start of our journey was me actually coming across the Dashdot podcast, and I would catch the bus into the city. Like, my daily commute for about 12 months was listening to the Dashdot podcast and educating myself on what we could achieve with property investment. So, yeah.
I can only take credit for that on behalf of the company, because if it was 16 months ago, if it was more than 16 months ago, it predates my time on the podcast. So, but well done to Goose, because he was hosting all of them that time. And there's some great listening there. So if you're listening to this, you want to if you haven't listened to too many episodes, you want to dig in a lot more, it is really, really valuable. So you're listening to the podcast a lot. I guess that sort of convinced you that, yes, property is going to be a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, I was listening to the podcast. Was really helpful for me to actually educate myself and take that ownership around, okay, what are we going to do as a couple to put the right foundations in place to build our wealth. And I became obsessed with the idea of getting an investment property that could be used as a vehicle to help us put the right things in place to build our future together and put us in good stead to try and achieve some freedom and flexibility and also security as well in terms of my partner Mick and I and where we're going with our future.
Okay, well, what do you do?
So I'm a community manager. So I work at Founder as a community manager and a live events host, an MC. So I actually host live workshops for a global community of entrepreneurs. So a lot of...
How big is that community?
So it's a community of over 30,000 people, aspiring entrepreneurs all around the world. Which is very cool.
So popping on our podcast is a walk in the park for you. It's sort of like, we don't have 30,000, and it's live, but it's not sort of up on stage in front of a live audience and all of that sort of thing. So this is well within your comfort zone.
But it is funny being on the other side. Like I'm usually the one interviewing people, so it feels a little bit funny for me.
Oh, okay. You usually have the easy part. Okay. Right. Now, you mentioned Mick. He's your partner?
Yeah. So my partner Mick and I, we had been together for a few years before we bought the property. So we'd probably been together for about 4 years. We bought our owner-occupier together, and then 2 years later, we bought our investment property through Dashdot. So, yeah, so Mick's a construction site supervisor for a large construction company based in Melbourne. So, yeah, we're in very different streams of work. But yeah, that's what he does.
All right. And so going back to the piece you just mentioned about the education, that seems to have been a really, really big part for you. Was there anything specific, any little light bulb moment, or was it more of just a gradual accumulation and suddenly the snowball's got to the bottom of the mountain and it's a great big snowball, not just a snowflake? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think for me it was listening to different stories of people that have worked with Dashdot and they've been able to purchase their own properties. Like it made me actually realize that it is achievable, and if you put the right things in place, get the right advice, that it is actually really achievable to get that funding from the bank and utilize it as an engine to secure an investment property. So I think the light bulb moment for me was the fact that if you put the right things in place, it is achievable. Okay.
And so that's getting into that first investment property. Was there any fear or anything that you were worried about? Like, what was the emotional experience of getting your first investment property like?
The fear, knowing what we could achieve as a couple and knowing the opportunities that we could create for ourselves with an investment property, for me, that outweighed the fear of what could happen. Like I was so excited and so convinced by the idea of this being the right move, the move in the right direction. I was so convinced on the potential it had that outweighed any thoughts of fear or any feelings of fear for me.
And so when you're coming up for that first settlement on that first property or the first, when you go at that moment, when you go unconditional, it's like when you buy investment properties or any properties, it is sort of like a series of small celebrations, right? You've got, oh yes, the offer's been accepted, get the champagne. Then it's like, oh, we've gone unconditional, get the champagne again. Oh, we're settling. Okay, get the champagne again. Seems like a series of small celebrations. Was there any nervous anxiety or was it sort of like nervous excitement, or was it like overjoy? Where were you sort of on the emotional spectrum?
Yeah, I think there was a lot happening around that time, and I actually felt like, really nervous and excited, but also really proud that we'd put the right building blocks in place. Like from going from listening to a podcast for 12 months and trying to get pre-approval, it not being the right time, and then going back to our broker like 6 months later, getting pre-approval again, and then starting that process with Dashdot. When we were presented with our first property, I was actually really excited. And I turned 30 in that same week. Like we signed the contract on our property, and then I had my 30th birthday, and I was just wrapped, because I was like, I've been so focused on getting this investment property. I've spoken to my partner about it, and we've worked on this together. We've put the right things in place, and we've achieved this goal. And it's something that had been in my sights for like probably a 2-year period, and then I signed the dotted line for my 30th birthday. So yeah, it meant a lot. It was really exciting, that sense of achievement and goal attainment, and also teamwork as well. Like achieving that with your partner. It was really cool.
You mentioned Meg. Did he need any convincing, or was he already on the property path with you?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, right? Because I spend so much time by myself listening to the Dashdot podcast, like educating myself and learning about the potential of property investment. And Mick and I we've always been on the same page around putting the right things in place to build our future together and build our future, build our wealth together. But we're also very different people. Like my role is to be a fun and engaging community manager, live events host, like engage with audiences and entrepreneurs, like very big sky kind of thinking. And his role in his day-to-day is to make sure that a large commercial building has been built in the right way, following the right process by the right timeline, making sure so many moving parts are all working together. So it's kind of like you've got a creative on one side and a very methodical thinker on the other side. So what I learned throughout the process is that we are actually different profiles in terms of when you look at like how people make buying decisions, we're actually very different people. So it was really what made it actually really easy was...
In what way, when it comes to the buying decisions, are you really different people?
So I think I can actually see the potential and the future opportunities of what we could achieve. And he very much wanted the numbers, the data, the previous results, like what else for us to partner with Dashdot, what else have they achieved to give us all the information and the data to make a really educated decision about this.
Right. Okay. I thought you meant in terms of like just in general buying decisions, because they have that old expression like, a man will pay $10 for a $5 item he needs. A woman will pay $5 for a $10 item that she doesn't need. And in my experience with my wife, that's basically how it plays out. And I get home and there's some stuff that we don't need. It's like, but it was on special, so I had to. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? But anyway, sorry, I digress. Okay, so you're from quite different kind of psychologies when it comes to, we're making big purchase decisions. Were you sort of ahead of him on the journey, or did you both sort of get there together, but through different paths? Was there any convincing? How did that pan out?
I think I naturally was more aware of Dashdot as a business because I'd come across the Dashdot podcast. But I think what made it really achievable for us to be on the same page in this journey was looking at the evidence, looking at the data, just looking at all the examples of people in the exact same position as us who've done this and achieved great results.
Where I'm really going with it is there any advice that you can impart and share with the listeners on, like you understand property's awesome, it can create the freedom, choice and abundance that you want, but my partner's not into it. They don't get it yet. Any advice that you have for people in those kind of situations?
I think about how your partner does get on board with different things and what drives them and what motivates them. And if you're in a partnership or a marriage with someone, think about bring it back to what you want to achieve as a couple. So what's your why? What's your motivator? We both know that we want to travel, we want to go on cool trips overseas, and we also want to have a level of stability and security. And so positioning, for me, it was around having conversation with my partner as this could be the thing that gets us closer towards what type of life and what type of life we want to live together.
So maybe goal orienting the outcome.
Yeah.
So if you sort of like, okay, well, we both agree that this is what we want to achieve. We need a way to get there. Saving our whole lives probably isn't going to do it. But if there's another way, property, are you open to it? And it doesn't necessarily need to be, right, well, okay, we're going to do property. Let's run off to a buyer's agent. It can be sort of like, well, let's get on board with the idea of property first. and then things will just sort of naturally progress in a sensible, intelligent way, would be my sort of understanding. Now, you've mentioned having the right things in place is a phrase that I don't know if you've noticed, but you've used it a few times. And I'm interested what you mean by putting the right things in place or having the right things in place.
I think it's about, while we're in the position to set up our future, make the most of this opportunity. So we're two full-time employees with incomes, no kids, and we're in this unique position where we can actually purchase something that can work for us in the long run. And the property that we've purchased, we purchased with the intention of it increasing in value, which it has. And so that's actually laid like a really nice foundation at this point in our lives to, yeah.
Yeah, we call those foundation properties because, you get the right one or two early on. And it's suddenly like your life can then take a completely different trajectory because suddenly there's a whole lot of equity there. And with that equity, there is opportunity because you can leverage it and go again. Or there's also security because if something happens, heaven forbid, you've got a little bit of a buffer to fall back on, depending on how much leverage, how much they're leveraged up, but suddenly you do have a lot of equity. So you can sell if you need to, sort of thing. So that level of confidence, I think, is important. It's probably also worth mentioning that you are basically like the bank's favorite kind of person or the lender's favorite kind of person, right? Double income, no kids. So there is this beautiful little window where you guys can go really hard, get the right things in place, aka a property portfolio. And then if there's a decision further down the track where children come into the equation, you sort of can end up going from two incomes supporting two people to one income supporting three, or four or five if you have twins or triplets, right? So when the bank's looking at you, it looks at you in a very different way. I know from experience, right? Once you've had a few children, the banks, the lending can tighten up. And at that point, you need to be a little bit more creative. But if you're fortunate enough, and, the right sort of things have gone on in your life where you've been exposed to what I would probably call the right information around the property market and things like that. If you get the property bug early enough, then you can get in. You can get those foundational properties. You can set up the portfolio. And then everything after that starts to get easier and easier and easier. Let's talk about results. I mentioned at the top of the podcast that you bought the property for $420,000. The latest val, this is in May. So at the time of airing this, I would imagine that the property's gone up significantly more, but the vals are normally every 6 months, right? So we're about 4 months into that at the moment. So maybe 5 by the time this episode airs. So you may well be looking at another big chunk of maybe 50, 60,000. Have you had any valuations done yourself in the meantime?
No, I think we're just working off of that one. Yeah, which is amazing.
Right. Just going to enjoy the big surprise in a couple of months, and then it's bang. And there's a reasonable chance you'll be able to top 600,000 there, right? From a purchase price of 420, that's pretty amazing, really. Now the yield on the property is nice and solid, 7.43%. But here's some interesting numbers as well. The cash that you guys put into the property was $123,009, and the total growth back in May was already 142. So that is a 109.24% return on invested capital. So 109% in a little over a year, right? 16 months, not too long at all. What's the sort of feeling around that? Because I know you mentioned that you have at some points looked at other options for investing as well, shares, etc.
I've got a share portfolio and it just sort of sits there in the background and slowly ticks away. And if you look at the comparison, it's actually mind-blowing to see what that 109% return on capital in a 16-month period. Like, it's actually insane to think of how fast that has grown, how fast an investment property has grown compared to the shares that I've had sitting there slowly ticking away for years.
Well, those those kinds of results that people seem to be able to get through property, they are achievable in other ways, right? Like you can achieve that at the casino. If you just go to the roulette wheel and you bet everything on black, and if you win, great. But it does come with a pretty substantial risk, right? In that case, there's a little over a 50% risk that you're going to lose everything as well. And so this is why we're often talking about risk-adjusted returns and how property just constantly, for the risk that you're taking, did it feel risky, this purchase in WA?
I think increasing the loan, when we already had an owner-occupier loan, like we already had a mortgage. So getting another mortgage for this, it did feel risky. Like there's always risk in increasing that and knowing that you can keep up with the repayments and you can service it. So it did feel risky to an extent. So this is hearing these results, like you actually blink and 12 months has gone past. So hearing these results is like, it's so reassuring. Like it's actually really cool.
Right. Well, that's the best thing that we can hear, really. The total growth since the purchase has been 33.81%. And just to remind everyone listening, this is from a val that's now 4 months old, right? And the property certainly hasn't gone backwards. So, all of the results that you're hearing, by the time this episode airs, they'll be substantially higher, I would imagine. So that's also a good thing. All right, let's ask you now, what is the dream? Setting up all of these foundation properties at the moment, doing things like that. Where do you want to live? What's it all for?
I think it's been a really cool starting point into building our future, and I want to get more of them. Like I have this, I actually pull out butcher's paper and do like a big scribbling exercise of everything that I want in my future. And we did this exercise together. Like we rolled out butcher's paper and we both drew what we want in our future. And there's marriage, there's kids, there's travel, there's investment properties. And I honestly see investment properties as being an engine that can help us have this sort of life that we want and get us that, just win us back some of that freedom and that time and that flexibility so that we can do the fun things, like so that we can go on overseas trips and adventure and see the world and just spend more time doing fun things and spend more time with our families as well.
It's an interesting take. I think as people are at different stages of their lives, the dreams can sort of change and move around. And so when you're 20 and you're looking at life, it's like, I want a house in that suburb that's huge and has a swimming pool and a tennis court, and that's success. And then as you sort of like reaching 30s, sometimes that can change, and then you hit 40s and it changes, and I'm closing in on 50. It'll change again and again and again. But the one constant always seems to be creating the freedom, choice, and abundance so that you can decide. You're in control. You're deciding what happens in the future. You're not beholden to, I have to do this, or I have to do that, or I'm stuck here. And it really does feel like in some places, and I know that I reference Japan a lot on the podcast, people are under a lot less stress over here because basically there hasn't been any inflation for 30 years. And so the only stress that people have in Japan comes from their boss. In terms of day-to-day living and things like that, they can save, they can be peaceful, they can be relaxed. They're not under massive amounts of financial stress because they save and they have money in the bank. And so if they lose their job or if something happens and they have medical expenses or anything like that, they've all got like a couple of years worth in the bank. Whereas in Australia, New Zealand, where I'm from, in the UK, in America, it's always like we're always fighting to outpace inflation and the cost of living. And we can't do it just by saving. And so the only way really to get ahead and create the freedom, choice, and abundance that everyone I think is seeking is to get into an asset that is going to outperform inflation. And when you're looking at like, the property went up by 33% and change, a total equity increase of 142K, you've effectively doubled your money in the 16. So all of that money that you put in at the beginning, right, which was a substantial amount, you've more than doubled that in that time frame, which is fairly amazing, right? I mentioned 109%. I think that's actually 109% per annum, right? So that's doubling your money per year, perhaps. I would have to recheck that because it doesn't have a little PA. But looking at the numbers, feels like it might. But anyway, all right. Sorry, I digress. Yeah, that's a phenomenal result. All right, and plans from now? What are the next steps for you?
Plans from out, we have a few life milestones coming up. Like we have a big wedding coming up, so that's a big plan for us in the next 6 months. And from there, I think.
Dare I ask? I was going to say, dare I ask whose wedding?
Our wedding.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah.
Very good. So you've got that, okay?
Yeah. So we're getting married. We're getting married soon, so that's a big thing on the agenda for us. And from there, I think it's about looking at, okay, when's the next one? Like when can we get the next one, and how can we use the first one to help us get there? So, yeah, it's exciting.
Well, I would say you've got a lot of equity there. So from the equity perspective, I think it sounds like you should be fairly sorted out. If the cash flow numbers are going to look okay, then you may well be in a really good position to go for your second one now. And just keep on building out that platform. Yeah. Any advice that you would have to anyone listening to this who might be on the fence, wondering, property? Should I really be doing property? Should I be doing something else? What would you say to them?
I think what really helped us, like my advice would be to look at the results, look at the data, get yourself up to speed, and educate yourself on the data that's out there. Like, speak to other people who have done it, look at stories of people in a similar position, and get yourself into the frame of mind of the fact that it is achievable. And there are normal people in normal 9-to-5 jobs getting investment properties and then using that as an engine to set themselves up in the right way. So seek out the information, ask people who've done it, like get advice from people who are those 2 to 3 steps ahead of you, and ask them what they did and how they did it, and utilize the information that you have at hand. Awesome.
Well, I think that's a really, really good note to finish on. Thank you so much for appearing on our podcast, Leah. It's been a real pleasure. I'm absolutely delighted by the results that you've got, and it's obviously making a huge difference to your life and the trajectory that you're going to be able to take now. And all the best for the wedding. I hope it goes off with a hitch. And hopefully we'll be seeing you on the podcast in a year or two as you accumulate property number 2, property number 3. We can watch the journey progress with enthusiasm. Thank you so much. And to everyone listening, thanks for listening. And we hope we'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much, Emil. Thanks for having me.